Hey gamers, it's Matt Miller from Me First Games, and today we're going to continue our tutorial. Basically, we left off with a cube in a scene, and we're going to go through the inspector and add some physics to it. You're going to learn how to use the inspector and add components to game objects. So let's get to it. This is our project from before, and basically we have a cube in the scene, and we want to add physics to this cube. You'll notice on this cube that was created, it has a mesh. That means it's a 3D element and it has different vertices, so you can actually render it, right? So the mesh data is going to contain all these points, for example. And we have a mesh renderer that's going to render a mesh. Render means to draw. So if we have a mesh renderer, obviously we can render the mesh. And we're going to have a material on it. A material is a way to draw different things in your game. And we have a collider. This is a box collider. And if we play the game, nothing's going to happen. It's just going to sit there. But we can add an element called a rigid body. And the rigid body is basically going to simulate physics on a primitive shape. So if we add the rigid body, we can say use gravity, and we'll leave kinematic off, and that will apply gravity to the cube. There it goes. Let's say we want the cube to fall but not fall off the screen. Like maybe it should land on the ground. Well, you know, this is cool, but it's pretty worthless. So let's move the cube up just a little bit, and we're going to add another 3D game object. Let's add a cube. We're going to reset the transform because it put it in a weird spot. And what we're going to do here is we're going to create a ground. So I'm going to move this by just a little bit. I'm going to hold in command or control depending on what platform you're on, and I'm going to move it to the ground. I'm going to switch to the scaling tool right here, and you can also use Q for pan, W to switch to move, E to switch to rotation, R for scale, and T for the positioning scale tool. And you can see you can actually scale like this. So now we have this floor level, and I can rename this if I click and wait. I'll rename it to floor, and I'll rename this to player. So this cube eventually will be our player, and this is our floor. So if we hit play here, what's going to happen? Oh my gosh, it fell and landed, but it was not very quick, so I'm going to hit W, switch to the move tool, or you can click up here. I'm going to move this down. I'll move you up just a little bit. I'll click on the main camera and see the preview. I want to move this up even more. So now when I hit play, it will fall and land on this. And now you may be wondering why the floor is not falling too. Because remember, we had to manually add a rigid body to the player object. It has gravity enabled. The floor is just a collider, which means things collide with it, but it doesn't have a rigid body. The floor is not going to move, it's static, so we don't need a rigid body on it. So by default, gravity does not apply to anything you're seeing. If you want gravity, you have to add a rigid body and enable it, or you have to manually move or add force to it. So that's all it really takes to add physics to your game. Essentially, you can add different shapes and drop in colliders on them. For a box mesh, it's really simple. You can add a box collider. Or for a sphere, you can add a sphere. There's also cylinders and planes. But essentially, if you're going to be using things that require meshes like odd shapes, you can use a mesh collider, which isn't the most performant solution, or you could add a bunch of box and sphere colliders to the shape of the mesh. Either way, this is really easy and really simple. The thing I recommend you doing is to add more shapes, more game objects, add some colliders, and play around with them. That's it for today. I'm Miller from Me First Games, and we make games for me and you.